Okay, so let's go ahead and start adding some material so that you can see how to create posts and media and pages. So you'll notice that first of all, we are in the WP admin panel, and anytime you want to get to the WP admin panel, by the way, if you're not logged in to your panel, then you can always go up to the root level directory of your um, installation of WordPress, which would be this in my case. So mine is called the Project 2 folder. And then right after that, you would type your / and then you would type wp-admin /. It'll take you to the login screen. And from there, you can log in to get to this backend. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click on posts. And first of all, you'll notice that when I hovered over posts, it gave me these options: add new, categories, and tags. And if I click on if I click on the posts, then it gives me the drop-down feature as default view right here, where it says all posts, add new, categories, and tags. And the other thing too that you'll notice is that over here on the right, it's showing all of my existing posts, and you'll see that they're currently uncategorized. And you'll also notice that there are a whole bunch of posts that exist only because of my plugin that I showed you how to install earlier, which is this WP example content plugin. If I were to disable that, well, if I were to actually go and remove all that content, I could by doing so with a click of the button. So what I might want to go ahead and do is, I could add some categories and then I could categorize these things. And there are some different ways that you could do that. But first of all, before we go and organize all of this stuff, you'll also notice that if I were to click on the title of the post that exists, then what it's going to do is it's going to take me to that post, and it gives me a few pieces of information. Let me just navigate around this for you. So it automatically is going to show the permalink up here. The permalink is the URL that it's going to write, and then if you wanted to change that for some reason, then you could come up here and modify it, click OK, and then when you go to update it later, it'll change the URL that someone would need to navigate to get to it. And then also down here, you'll see that we have just a bunch of dummy text because this was a dummy post, but this is what's referred to as the WYSIWYG editor. And what you might see is you might see something that looks like this. Remember I showed you before, this is the kitchen sink. Okay, so if we want to add more content, or we want to, for instance, go down here and put a title or a heading of some sort, we can come here and we could put a heading level. Now, one thing you need to realize is that the heading that's up here, the actual title of the page, is going to show up as an H1. So if we put heading down here, we could call it, I don't know, heading 2. If you wanted to make it so that it was nested properly, that everything would be nested under this as an H1, then you could make, oops, sorry about that. You could highlight this new heading 2 and you could tell it to be a heading 2. And then later we can see what that looks like. But you could also have a host of other things. You have bold, italics, just like, in Word, a Word document. Lists, you also have something where you could turn something into a block quote. So for instance, if I wanted to see how this looked as a block quote in this particular theme, I could click that and then it shows me what the block quote looks like. You can also add a horizontal rule if you want to separate content for some reason. Like if I clicked this, then you see it adds a thin horizontal rule. So if I wanted maybe a horizontal rule before and after my block quote, I could do that. You can do different text alignments. This is how you can turn something into a link. So if I wanted to make that word a link, select it, and then I would type in the URL. If you want it to open in a new window, you could do so. You can also click on this if you want it to link to something that already exists within your page or within your website, and you could do a quick search. So for instance, if I were to say block quote, you see that it automatically finds the things that have the word block quote in the titles. I could add the link. Let's just make it go to the block quote post. And then you see how it styles it here. If I want to take the link off of that, for instance, oops, excuse me, I can just hit this undo link. And then something else that's kind of nice too is that if you're on a blog post area that you don't want the entire article to show, then what you can do is you can come down after a certain amount of material and you can click on this insert read more tag, and then what that does is it puts in a comment essentially that only WordPress understands. So if I jump over here to the text view, you see that WordPress actually does read some of the comments, and it's going to read that more as something where it cuts it off basically, and it gives you a read more button. All right, and you see that these are some other basic things that you would recognize from other WYSIWYG editors. One thing that you might not recognize, however, would be, and by the way, here's special characters, so if you wanted to add, you know, a copyright symbol or an M dash or an N dash, so forth. Now this, where it says paste as text, is really important. So like if you're bringing your text in from a Word document or some other thing that has existing formatting and it's in your clipboard, you probably want to click on this paste as text, and it says, hey, now we're in plain text mode, and it basically reminds you or warns you so that you know that it's not going to carry over formatting. And the thing that's nice about it not carrying over formatting is that sometimes your formatting will get really messed up. And it'll look like weird characters or symbols on the screen. So if you ever see some really weird characters or symbols on the screen that you weren't expecting, it's probably because of some copy and pasted material, like maybe with special double quotes or apostrophes, commas, things like that. Okay, and now the other thing is that over here on the right where it says publish, you can have a button that allows you to preview your changes before you update it. The other thing is that where it says status, you can always, it says published right now, but you could edit that and you could change it so that it is a draft, form, or pending review so that it wouldn't show up on the regular site. Now be aware that as an administrator, you will see these things show up if you have the URL to them, but they won't show up to other people. So that's something to be aware of, not to be alarmed about. Another thing too, where it says public for visibility, if I click edit, now I could do a few things. One is I could make it private. The other thing is I can password protect it, which is really great, especially if you have stuff specifically for clients that you want to give them. You could just email them with a password and then they could see the information. Also, you can click this stick post to the front page, and what that does is it creates what's referred to as a sticky post notation in the database. And by making something sticky, what it will do is it automatically, and depending on the theme, it'll automatically make something sticky rise to the top of the list so that it doesn't show up, you know, maybe at the bottom of the list because it's in a chronological order. The other thing is that you can tell sticky posts to show up in certain places and it'll always pull it. A good example would be if you, for instance, have like a slideshow that will work with sticky posts. So if you wanted to have a slideshow on the front page, or maybe that's what your theme supports, then anything that you make sticky is going to automatically be promoted into that slideshow. And the thing that's pretty cool about that is that a lot of times, you know, it is based on maybe your featured image here, so that if you have a featured image set, it will slide through your featured images. And allow you to click and it'll take you to the post. So there are lots of different things that can happen with a sticky post, and it really depends on your theme and on your plugins that you have installed. So, but this is where you would make something sticky or unsticky if you wanted to take it out of a list that's showing up. And then down here you've also got some stuff for format. I don't typically really do anything with this. This is my own opinion, but I find that some of these things can be a little bit, I don't know, silly, but some people like them. And what it'll do is it allows you to, it'll strip certain pieces of information off. If you say image, then it will only show an image, for instance, from a post that maybe is your featured image or something, or video if there's one in there, or a quote, instead of actually showing the whole post like in a blog roll or something. So anyway, and then categories down here. Right now we don't have any additional categories. What I could do is I could create a new category for all of these things that are sort of dummy text or dummy posts if I wanted. I'm going to avoid doing that right now, but you could add a category straight from here. What is kind of a better thing to do than just adding categories willy-nilly is to add them up here in a really organized way and try to do your best not to just start adding stuff from here, because having a really well organized set of categories is going to be a lot smarter than just haphazardly adding them here and there and everywhere, unless you know for sure that you really are going to have a category that's added later anyway, then you can add it here as you're making the post. And then you also have what are called tags, and tags are searchable in a different way than in categories. And you've probably all seen tag clouds where, you know, you can tag something so that it is maybe of a it's similar to categories, but it's not quite the same. And we'll get into the differences more later. Categories are really things that you're going to depend on in almost every theme. Tags, not necessarily. So, and then there's also a featured image that I'll show you how to do on a different post. And what's going to happen with a featured image is if it's not there, it won't show up. And if it is set, then in certain themes, it'll show up, usually at the top of the page. So what I'm going to do is I'll click on this update, and you see here it's like spinning until it's done. All right, and if I wanted to view the post now, I could do so, and it's going to refresh in the same window, and you can see how it this is an H1, and if you were to right click it and inspect the element, for instance, you would see in fact that it is an H1. Has a lot of other stuff around it too, but then that way you know that this H2 right here, if I inspect it, you know that that's properly nested in the document so that you've got an H1 that is under an H2, right? That kind of makes sense. And the other thing too is that if we were to go back to here, right, you see the way that multiple paragraph post shows up, it doesn't show the entire post because we had that more break. All right, and so if I click on this now, it'll take me to the full post. Okay, so that's how you can sort of see what things will look like. And let's go ahead and also make a page real quickly, and I'm going to jump back in here. And by the way, as a reminder, this is just the default 2015 theme that's currently installed. I haven't even looked at themes yet. Now, oh, the other thing too, let's go back real quickly and let's look at our posts. And there is another thing I wanted to show you. Look at the same file here. And if you go up here to the top where it says screen options, you'll notice that there's a lot of other stuff that you could be showing right now. You could be showing who the author is. You could be showing the slug down at the bottom. By the way, the slug is going to be this thing, okay? But you can see what the slug is here. You can see if there are comments that are attached to this, and discussion stuff, trackbacks. You can also see the excerpt, which I'll tell you about in a second. You can see revisions. You can also tell it to be 1 or 2 columns. So I'm going to click that again. And now if I scroll to the bottom, you'll see that there are a bunch of other things that are showing up. So what's really nice with revisions is that, like, you'll see that it auto saves every so often, so that even like if there's a network failure, power failure, or if you accidentally navigate away from the page, you'll see that it does do auto saving. And if you wanted to restore an older version, you could do that. Now, I don't want to add a comment, but somebody, you know, comments would show up here if there were any. I'm not going to look at that right now, so I'll collapse it. The slug, like I said before, is also at the top, so that's not necessary for me to show. And it does show the author. If I wanted to change the author, though, that's kind of a nice thing to be able to do. If you're an administrator, you can do that. Now, this thing called the excerpt, it's not going to show up at all in some themes, but in other themes, this is really an important piece of information where maybe the excerpt is going to show up before anything else, or it'll show up instead of a bunch of other just jumbled stuff. So like in some of the archive pages of some themes, whenever it goes to look for information, like if you do a search for instance, it's going to pull up an archive formatted page, and what it might do is just show you all the beginning stuff run together that is the beginning of the post. Well, if you have an excerpt, it'll show that excerpt instead. And you can actually send HTML formatting into this too. So it's really actually pretty cool. and I'll show you how that works in the next demonstration.